What's going on, everyone? It's another episode of the WVSports.com podcast. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by the one and only Keenan Cummings. This is the Rich Rod Pod because the Mountaineers have named former head coach Rich Rodriguez as their now 36th head coach in program history. So the search wrapped up kind of last night on Wednesday night. It was sourced. We verified what Pete Thamel of ESPN reported. And then it was confirmed and officially announced by West Virginia University this morning on Thursday. And then tomorrow is the big day because Pat McAfee will be in town with his show, as well as will be the introductory press conference for Rodriguez. So, Keenan, there's a lot to unpack with the coaching search, with the decision of Rodriguez, with him coming here officially. So we can kind of start wherever you want to start, and we'll go from there. So you just kind of take it away.
Yeah, I guess it's the year of the comeback. What's old is new again. That's kind of what we said in our article, and it's true. You know, I've been around for a while. I'm not that old, but I've been around for a while. I remember Rich being here. I was in school when Rich was here. When Rich left, I never thought this would be a possibility, and here we are, 17 years later. Anything can happen. Before we get into this, I want to say big props to Vernon, the boss
100%.
man. He was all over this thing from start to finish, a lot of twists and turns. It ended up kind of where everyone thought it would end up, but I'm not sure it was a straight line there. So West Virginia got, a coach that has had a lot of success here, has won here. And I think that is very important when you're looking at this job, maybe more than most places. Winning at West Virginia isn't necessarily like winning at some other places. There's some things you need to do, some things you need to understand. And, I think every coach that's come in here that I've talked to has kind of had to learn that on the job. Rich understands that. He's been here, he's done it, he's had success. I understand, before anyone out there is rolling their eyes, it came 17 years ago. But look at what Rich was able to do this past year and his other stops. Outside that Michigan stop, he's had a lot of success comparatively to what programs have done in recent history. Even Arizona, I know it didn't end well, but he had them kind of rolling there for a while. So Rich understands that. I think there's motivation here for Rodriguez as well. He knows how it ended. Most people here know how it ended. It wasn't good. I don't want to get into that too much. It's kind of water under the bridge at this point, but it's a redemption story. The prodigal son returns home with a chance to kind of write another chapter to a story that many people thought was long closed. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Even crazier that this is going to go down on Friday the 13th. And then the game against Pitt this fall will be
on 9/13.
9/13.
Yeah.
This is just absolutely nuts how this all came together. Kind of feel like we're living in an alternate reality. The past, this thing really started to heat up the last 24 hours, but it's nuts to me just being where I'm from. I grew up in the state following the program. Back then I was in school, high school, college, so different seat than what I'm in right now. So kind of surreal to me as well, just because I never thought this would be a possibility until recently. And it's kind of nuts that we're here now talking about, the 32nd head coach at West Virginia being the 36th head coach at West Virginia, 61-year-old Richard Rodriguez.
Yeah, so for me, I'll start here. I do not have the experience with Rich Rod that you do. I was 5 years old in 2007.
You're dating me here. You're making me seem a lot older than I am.
See, no age is getting thrown out for you, so I think that's a good thing. But in all seriousness, I grew up. I had family that grew up in the state of West Virginia. I kind of went here a ton to the state, and then my mom, she's from the university, and so I kind of heard about Rich Rod. And then when I went to WVU, kind of hear about it more. I'm obviously in a different seat as well now, but I'm also in a different seat than you because I didn't experience it the first time around. I can speak for people on our message boards. There's a little bit of a divide, and I think that divide is expected.
Natural.
Yeah, it's natural, it's expected, and I'm interested to see how Ren Baker handles that, how Rich handles that. Truthfully, I think tomorrow at his press conference is a golden opportunity for him to kind of set the lay of the land of how he wants to approach this, because there's two ways. He can either ignore it, which I don't think he can
I'm not sure that's
realistically.
even a possibility, truthfully.
I know, but or he can own it and say he wants to kind of give back and get this thing where he really thought it could get to. Couple notes of what we've kind of been hearing publicly. Pat McAfee has been very vocal, obviously, for Rich Rod. And McAfee on a show today was very adamant that Rich Rod wants to get this right. He wants to make this right with the people, with the university, with the football program. And then going to your point, Keenan, understanding the state. I think that's something that a lot of people kind of had against Neil Brown, especially early on in his tenure, is not understanding the culture or the identity of what West Virginia is, what West Virginia football is, what it should be. Rich Rod gets it. You nailed it. He knows it. Everyone knows it, that he's a guy that was here for a long time. He's a guy that had tons of success here. And so being able to fully understand that kind of blue collar, hard work, chip on your shoulder, we're going to do what we have to do and have that level of toughness, that tough mindset. That's something that I think fans have been clamoring for during the Neil Brown era. And I think that will come day one with Rich Rod as head coach.
Yeah, who doesn't love a good redemption story in America? Come on. I mean, this is the country founded on redemption stories. And when it comes to West Virginia athletics, there might not be one that could compare to this. So I think that, you hit it. I wrote about it, and we'll have an article on it. We've had a lot of content up today. We'll have more coming, over the next couple of days. Of course, we'll have all the stuff from the press conference tomorrow. But, Rich's teams, they didn't always win, but they were tough and they were physical. And by the time he got that thing rolling in 2005, that Maryland game sticks out to me. That's kind of the game where the thing changed. West Virginia had won some football games. They were physical, they were tough, but they absolutely destroyed Maryland in that second half. It was big hit after big hit, punishing runs. That became kind of the brand, the DNA of Rich Rodriguez's team. Yes, everybody remembers spreading it out, running all over people, the fast, exciting offense, but they were tough and they were physical. And teams didn't want to play West Virginia back then. It was a team that teams didn't have a fun time playing because they were so tough and physical. And I think he demands that out of his teams. If you've watched any Jacksonville State games, and I am not, sitting around watching a ton of them by any means, but they play with that same brand. I think it's just ingrained in his teams. And you mentioned McAfee. He hit on something that was really kind of true in a sense. He mentioned that, they play that way because that's kind of how Rich was raised. West Virginia, he's tough, physical. And that's going to resonate. And I think that fans have been missing that. West Virginia found a little bit of that element in 2023, but couldn't really recapture it. I think Neil figured it out a little too late that that's the kind of brand of football you have to play here. It's the kind of brand that even if you don't win the games, the fans are still happy that you're out there, delivering blows and playing hard and tough and physical. And that's not a knock on the previous coaching staff. I don't want it to be taken that way, but it was something that was kind of the DNA of this program and something that really defined Rich Rodriguez when he was here the first time. And now he's going to get a chance to do it again. And I believe, what Pat McAfee said today, I believe that Rich kind of knows that this is a golden opportunity you don't get very often. And he has a chance to kind of correct some things. And I like the thing I like the most that Pat said is, he doesn't expect it to be handed. He knows he has to earn it back. He knows he's going to have to work hard to get people to understand, and kind of get on board with this thing. And I think, from everything we've heard, the financial commitments are going to be there. Obviously, with what we shared last week from Ren Baker, and before that with revenue sharing, it's going to be there. The Big 12 is wide open, as evidenced by this season. 6-5 West Virginia was technically still in the race the last week of the season. So it's there. But I do think with this move, I don't want to throw out numbers because I think that's silly, but the expectations have raised. You need to win. You need to win and win in a hurry. And I think people are expecting that. I think everybody's expecting that. The schedule next year on paper, once again on paper, can change a lot between now and then, but looks a little challenging. But you bring
Those
Rich Rodriguez
conference
back.
games are a little tough.
You bring Rich Rodriguez back to try to generate some success. And I think that, as I mentioned, he's done it before. He's had success here. He had this thing rolling. I mean, West Virginia at one point was right at the epicenter of college football. it's kind of a distant memory right now. I'm outside of what Pat McAfee's been doing because, the team hasn't been ranked in the AP poll since 2018. They've been ranked one time in any poll during that span. Rich had him ranked 4 of his 6 years here. And after that 3 and 8 year in his first year, and I know I'm talking about history here, and that doesn't matter really for the future. I understand that. But the point is, it's happened before. There's nothing to say it can't happen again. Now, we've also seen some of these hires go the other way. Bobby Petrino in Louisville, there's happened. But you've also had Bill Snyder's too, where he's come back and had a lot of success. So I think that how this hire ends up will be interesting. Who would have thought, when Ren Baker got this job, that he would have to fire Bob Huggins and hire Rich Rodriguez, within 2-year span? I mean, who would have thought that? That's just nuts to me that we're saying this out loud.
Yeah, if I had told you that at Ren Baker's introductory press conference, you would have laughed your butt off and not.
I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, but here we are. 2 things I want to kind of dive into there. First is the understanding of what McAfee said about Rich knows he has to earn the trust. That's very important in this situation.
I think it is too.
Just look at it. Just look at our message boards, Keenan, and how immediately after we announced the news of it's Rich, how many people said, "Oh, I don't want to renew my season tickets. Oh, I don't want to give to this program. Oh, there's going to be a lot that has to be proven to me." And so when you have people all of a sudden saying that, that's like a big deal. And even just on that coaching thread, which, man, that was a thread to keep up with throughout this week. But there's people that are seriously divided on Rich Rodriguez being the head coach of West Virginia. And so, yes, winning cures a lot, but
I think it needs to be handled with grace.
I do too. But I also think that he owes a level of an apology. And if he truly wants to earn the trust back, he has to show that from day one starting tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that'll be important. And I would be shocked if that's not, a point of emphasis in this whole thing. And it's kind of, the situation is now, like, you look at West Virginia has a coach. I know everybody was freaking out. I thought Ren, again, did a great job, kind of wrapped this thing up. I think it was 11 days. I think the basketball search was 10 or 11 days.
11. Basketball was 11. I think this might have stretched into day 12, technically, if you want to say the Thursday he was hired. But either way, yeah, 11.
Yeah, I think that's really good. They still have plenty of time to get things done.
I also think on that note too, though, sorry to interrupt, but a lot of fans were overreacting to what other programs around the country were doing. And I think that was a little bit unfair to Ren and his staff, just because from what we saw and from what we knew, the candidate pool that they were talking to, most of them were playing a football game last weekend. And so that complicates things. And then, a couple of them still have football games to be played, whether it be Penn State or Army. And so that just kind of changes the whole landscape of things. And then go ahead.
I was going to say, not to mention the fact that when Ren Baker says he shuts things down, he does. Information is hard to come by, and he does a good job. He really does. So there's a lot of guessing out there and a lot of people trying to connect the dots that aren't there. And that's the one thing that I'll always credit Vernon Bailey for, is he doesn't say something he doesn't know or isn't told.
He never jumps the gun either. He always makes sure all the ducks are in a row and then proceeds, which credit to him. He nailed it throughout this whole thing. He was on it, especially leading up to it, of the chaos that was Wednesday, with the Heartline news and all of that, and that report coming out. And then just the earlier in the week with Colton Nicky up at Penn State, he was kind of on it before everyone, and hat tip to him, seriously, because I know he had a crazy week.
Yeah, it's nuts. Coaching searches are, I know, very fun for fans. A little fun for us. It's exciting. It's an exciting time, but a lot of work. A lot of work. And then now let me say this. The work's just now beginning, because now you start to get into a new coach, new staff, which I did want to transition into that a little bit. I think, this staff Rich puts together is going to be important. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does it. I would be very surprised if a few guys from Jacksonville State don't names that I connect the dots. Maybe some guys on this current staff could be options. I think there's going to be a lot of ways that this can be put together, and then it comes roster management. You're going to have to keep the guys that are here in the fold, which, again, hat tip to this current staff. I know it's getting lost in translation right now, but those guys are doing an excellent job, not only closing out the class, but keeping this team together, motivated to play. You've had a few guys in the portal, but I think West Virginia's actually had fewer than schools that.
So they're playing Memphis, and they have fewer than Memphis ahead of their
that
bowl
right
game.
there puts it into perspective. And I think that, some of that is they want to finish it right. And, we'll get into bowl talk, here later this weekend. But, I'm excited in a sense just to see kind of how this all comes together, because I know it's going to be the question, who's going to be West Virginia's GM? Who's going to be the defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator? Right now, I don't know. I don't think anybody does yet.
Here's a question that we can discuss. Out of anyone on the current staff, it could be as few as one, as many as like 3 or 4. What if you could pick any to stay? Who would you think to go with? Because I have a couple off the top of my head. I think you kind of got to keep Blaine Stewart. I think Rasheed Marshall in his role, he can stay there. I think you try and keep Chad Scott just because of his relation to a lot of the players on the offensive side of the ball. And then if anyone on defense, I would say A.J. Jackson's a name that you try and keep around. Those are kind of the 4 names off the top of my head of the current staff in place that I would say would be of greatest interest to keep around.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of candidates. I really do. I think that Neil put together a pretty good coaching staff.
Yeah.
Obviously not all of them are going to be retained. It's just the nature of the beast. But Trey Nyer's another guy in the recruiting department that I think could really help West Virginia. But there's a lot of variables here. It's going to be interesting to see how many guys come with Rich. Rod Smith's obviously a name that's going to be immediately linked. He's been here before. And some other guys that the message board people that have been around Rich and can kind of connect, but we'll see. I do think it's going to be a fun couple weeks. Interesting time for
Merry Christmas right now.
Yeah, interesting time with everything going on. But it's exciting. I think that once people get over the initial shock, one way or the other, people are going to have. And I'm not trying to tell anybody how to feel about this. People are going to feel how they feel. But I think that once people get over the initial shock and kind of things get rolling, it'll become more about WVU football than it will Rich Rodriguez, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think it's more of let's gather around the thing we love rather than the person we might dislike type of thing. If you're an anti-Rich Rod supporter, right? Like if you're very anti-Rich right now, I still love West Virginia and want to be a West Virginia fan, and I'm not going to let Rich Rodriguez's past ruin that excitement for me. That's kind of, I think, what you're hitting at, right?
Well, yeah, and also I think that, like we've mentioned, I think tomorrow could go a long way, and I just encourage people to keep an open mind, with the whole thing. Obviously, I have been blown away with what Ren Baker has done here. I think he does an excellent job. I think he does very professional, how he goes about these searches and how he makes these hires. I don't think the guy's made a bad move yet in terms of, his job as the athletic director. So, he found that this ended up being the right fit. And I think that people at least deserve to hear him out and kind of see what's going on, and how this is going to work. I think obviously financial backing is big here too. I think that you got all over Pat McAfee's show. I don't care who you are, that's free publicity. West Virginia would not be talked about, in a lot of places.
Wasn't for McAfee.
Yeah. So
I also think it's important to note it on the Ren Baker front. If you want to go like major sports at West Virginia, we'll say football, basketball, women's basketball, and baseball are probably the top 4. The most tenured coach out of those 4 is a coach that Ren Baker has had to hire in his first 2+ years on the job, and that's the women's basketball coach. So when you think of it that way, that perspective is crazy for the work that Ren has had to do. He had to replace a living legend in Bob Huggins, and that whole ordeal. He then had to go get a third women's basketball coach in 3 years and replace someone who just legit walked out after the NCAA tournament. And then he had to go replace one of the greatest, if not the greatest, baseball coach in West Virginia program history, and Randy Mazey, and deal with that. And then now he had to replace Neil Brown and this hire is going to probably be the biggest one, no matter what. The most defining of the Ren Baker era at WVU, or the Ren Baker legacy as a whole, just for himself, of can you turn West Virginia football back to where it once was? And it's not competing for a national championship, but it is being ranked and nationally relevant.
Yeah, I think that's the general point here. The expectations and the product, which Neil mentioned, kind of the resources and the expectations, and there's some truth to that. But I think the expectations here is you need to beat some ranked teams. You need to be relevant. And for lack of a better term, West Virginia was not able to sustain that, under the last regime. So I think that's going to be the expectations. You're going to have to win some games. Obviously, everyone's already probably circling that Pitt game because you're not going to play them again for 4 years right now. So
yep,
we'll see how that goes. You got to win that game at home. But I think that this whole process has kind of brought us to a point that some of us thought were possible when it started, but also kind of can't believe it that it actually got here, is the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I am anxious and kind of interested to kind of see what this is going to be like and how it's different from the first time. Now, I didn't have the kind of, how the sausage is made view, the first time I was in the stands, but this is going to be interesting. And I think that West Virginia, for all the candidates out there, I don't think West Virginia made a poor hire. I think Rich can win here. I've made that very clear. Now he's just got to go do it. That's the thing. You got to go out there and do it. This is a guy that was the Conference USA Coach of the Year. He led Jacksonville State through the transition to FBS, won 9 games all 3 years there. So the guy can still very much coach. And now the last thing I'll say, and you probably won't get this reference, but just bring back the damn inflatable helmet.
I've seen it. I don't fully get it, but I've seen it. But one more thing we should hit on before we go is the resource side of this all. I know you touched on that word, but it seems to be that money will be a serious non-issue now in terms of NIL and rev share and things like that. So, I mean, we can obviously understand how and why that's important, but if you could just, Keenan, just kind of talk about why that's important and what that could do for a school like West Virginia in a conference like the Big 12, which, as you said at the top, is wide open.
Well, it's everything, especially the revenue sharing aspect. It's the most important thing. That's why Ren Baker hit on that so much in his press conference. I think he mentioned it 3 or 4 times, two or three when it wasn't even asked about. I think that, you're able to legitimately compete with some of these teams because it's not going to be an even playing field. There'll still be NIL, but it'll be more even than it's been. You have kind of a cap to work with, and they're going to be at full or close, and then you have the NIL component on top of it. It takes money to get players, guys. I know this sounds crazy. We're talking about college football, but everybody talking about transfers. It's
no longer the McDonald's bag with a boatload of cash in it?
Nah, they got rid of those. They just do it up front now. They don't even care. But, yeah, you got to have money to get players. It's really that simple. And everyone's always wondering, well, why didn't they go out and get their transfer? You got to pay the players on your team too. It costs money to retain players. So there's only so much money to go around, and it's very good sign that West Virginia is fully committed to being competitive in the area that's going to matter the most.
I also think as far as transfer portal wise goes, things will really heat up after the bowl game as far as departures from West Virginia specifically. The biggest one is Josiah Trotter, but paying attention to his social media, it seems like he could potentially be back in the fold.
Look at you, you sleuth.
Be back in the fold for the Mountaineers. He put something on his Instagram story about Rich Rod, and for everyone who loves player bios, he put West Virginia football back in his bio, which he did take out when he entered the portal.
There is something to that. I mean,
there is a level of something to that. I agree.
Do that stuff at the pros too.
Yeah, it usually means I want traded or I want more money, but the money part could be real here because of NIL. And he had visits scheduled to, I believe, Missouri and Washington is what Pete then reported, but I don't think
he plays in the bowl game. I'm jumping to conclusions. I'm just making.
I think you are, but I think that he's probably a guy that Rich and staff,
they'll definitely want to talk to
the portal. They'll want to at least give him the time of day and see. He's really talented, but there really haven't been that many portal departures as far as impact guys. Yeah, you've lost some depth pieces. I know Jalen Anderson. I think Riley Collins. I think one of the Jackson twins, if not both of them,
TJ Crandall.
TJ Crandall entered. So there's a little bit of production there, not a ton outside of Trotter. But yeah, credit to the staff for keeping them together and just kind of keeping the focus on the focus. I know we'll get into bowl prep later this weekend, as you said, but I was on the Memphis podcast last night and they asked me about what's the motivation for West Virginia. I said, well, the motivation is all these guys are old, especially on offense. And so I think you're kind of seeing that across the board is the leadership of this team strong internally. And that's important as they head into this week. And the portal will be very interesting to watch as I guess portal hot stove season for West Virginia will really get into full swing in the next week.
Yeah, and also just simply get that bad taste out of your mouth. Even if you don't win this football game, you
gotta
well. You got to put something out there better than what happened in Lubbock. And that's the last time I'm talking about it, but that was a debacle.
Yeah. So that'll wrap it up. You got anything, or we closing this one out?
Nope, we're done.
All right, we're done. We'll be back with you tomorrow after Rodriguez's press conference. Go to our site to try and get as much content as you want because it is there. It's going to keep coming there. Also, our message boards. We still have that deal going on till spring, right? The free one, the free 99.
So. We're talking about it, so I hope so.
We are talking about it, so I hope so too. So that'll do it. I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. This is the WVSports.com podcast.